and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on Horizon Europe in a nutshell. My name is Judith Binden, and together with my colleagues Sascha Hugentobler and Francesco Kienzle, we will deliver this webinar today. All three of us work as so-called national contact points as NCPs with Euresearch. Euresearch is the organization in Switzerland that provides information and advice on the funding opportunities of the EU framework programs. As national contact points, we are specialized on specific parts of the program. And in the names of all the speakers, we would like to thank all our NCP colleagues who provided us with slides and information on their programs so that we can also introduce those to you today. We would also very warmly like to thank our colleague Hannah Estadio, who greatly helps us with the implementation of this webinar. It will give the aim of today's event is to give you an overview of the new framework program for research and innovation, named Horizon Europe. This program is scheduled to start at the beginning of next year and will end at the end of 2027. So it will run for 7 years. It is huge. It has an expected budget of about 85 billion euro and is divided into 3 main parts, the so-called pillars. In the following about 1 hour, each of us will present you one of those components, one of those pillars of the framework program. Now, because it's so huge and there's so many funding opportunities in 1 hour, we will just give you some appetizers on the different programs. Now, you are by default all muted and your videos are off. However, we would like to encourage you to interact with us and to use the chat to put your questions in there. We have reserved about 20 minutes at the end of our presentations to answer hopefully many of your questions. And you can always, of course, contact us bilaterally for more questions. With that introduction, I'd like to start with presenting the first pillar, Pillar 1. This pillar is named Excellent Science, and it's all about maintaining and reinforcing the excellent science base in Europe. The pillar is composed of 3 programs: the European Research Council, the ERC, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, and research infrastructures. If we compare that to the composition of the Excellent Science pillar in the current framework program, Horizon 2020, it's evident that these 3 programs were already included in the Excellent Science pillar of Horizon 2020. And that really means that for Pillar 1, or for the Excellent Science pillar, the change of the framework program is very much an evolution rather than a revolution. One main reason is that 2 of the programs, the ERC and the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, are so-called bottom-up programs, meaning that there's no predefined topics. Topics are not predefined by the European Commission. They're determined by the researchers themselves. What also becomes apparent is that under Horizon 2020, there was a 4th program included, the FET program, the Future and Emerging Technologies program. This has been renamed into EIC Pathfinder, and moved to Pillar 3. So it will be introduced by Francesco later on. The fact that the change of framework programs is very much an evolution for the Excellent Science pillar is very much the reason also for the European Research Council, the first program. The ERC is not governed by the European Commission, but by a body independent from it, the Scientific Council. It is implemented, however, by an agency that is accountable to the European Commission. So the main features of the ERC remain. It is support to individual outstanding principal investigators. It's support to their high gain, high risk frontier research projects. And scientific excellence is the only evaluation criterion. Scientific excellence is always assessed on the level of the PI, on one hand, based on her or his past achievements, and on the other hand, on the project that they propose. Now, on a national research funding landscape, this might not be so exceptional that it's all about scientific excellence. But once you hear a summary of Pillar 2 and 3, it becomes apparent that this is quite unique on the European level, where for most of the programs, you have to make a case in how your results will help to solve big societal issues, help to achieve EU policies, help to make Europe more innovative, create jobs, and so on. On a practical level, the host organization must be located in an EU member state or country associated to Horizon Europe. But grants are portable, meaning that you can move with your grant once you have your project accepted and also during the implementation of the project. Now, I'd like to spend a word on the issue that the host organization must be located in an EU member state or country associated to Horizon Europe. Switzerland is now fully associated to Horizon 2020, but a country needs to renegotiate the association to each framework program newly. The clear goal of Switzerland is that we want to be fully associated also to Horizon Europe. However, formal negotiations haven't started yet, and this is nothing to worry about because they can only start once the program has been formally adopted, and this will hopefully happen at the end of the year. This means also that the association contract will not be in place once the first calls open and close. But in previous framework programs, the association entered into force with retroactive effect. And there is good signs that this will also be the case for the 9th framework program, Horizon Europe. You find more information on the status of Switzerland on the website of the State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation, including an FAQ with questions that we also receive from researchers. Now, in the following, I would like to briefly go through the ERC grant types, and they're depicted here by or against the research age in terms of years after PhD. And I begin with the starting and the consolidated grant. The starting grant is for researchers between 2 to 7 years after their PhD, and the consolidated grant for those 7 to 12 years after their PhD. These time windows are implemented very strictly, but under certain circumstances, you can expand this eligibility time windows. What is to be noted is that within the grant types, research age is taken into account. That is, if you apply for a starting grant and you're just 2 or maybe 3 years after your PhD, a less comprehensive track record and CV is expected than for somebody who applies 6 or nearly 7 years after their PhD. Hence, if you feel you're competitive for your career stage and you have a project idea that matches the ERC expectations and is well thought through, there is typically no reasons to wait with applying. For more established senior research leaders, then, there is the advanced grant. This has absolutely no limitations in research age, and it's the past years of your track records that are assessed. The 3 grant types are grant types for one PI. One PI with one host institution typically applies. Additionally, there is the synergy grant. This grant is for 2 to 4 PIs to join forces with their complementary skills, with their complementary expertise to tackle a big research problem. This might sound a little bit like a collaborative project, but clearly it's not. The focus is still very much on the individual principal investigators, and also their collaboration is expected to be far more intense than in your typical collaborative project. Now, especially those of you who already know the ERC quite well are probably interested in when the next opportunities to apply are. And I present here a table that is deduced from public information on the ERC website that is, however, very largely tentative and subject to change. If Horizon Europe can start in time, the ERC plans to launch the starting grant on the 12th of January and the consolidated grant on the 21st of January, with deadline in March and April. You probably also read in the press or heard that there is a possibility that the framework program start will be slightly delayed, and so possibly those deadlines will also need to be shifted back a little bit. The ERC is, however, very determined, if at all possible, to stick to these March and April deadlines. The advanced grant will open in May and close at the end of August, as we're used to. Now, because typically starting and consolidated grant would open the year before the call year, and that is not possible because of the change of the framework program, there simply isn't time to implement all the call types within 2021. And so the Scientific Council has decided not to launch a synergy grant in 2021. However, the synergy grant is expected to be part again from work program 2022 onwards. So expect the synergy grant opening still next year, with a deadline then possibly in 2022. I haven't mentioned the so-called proof of concept grant so far. This is not a research grant, but this is top-up funding for ERC grant holders to assess the valorization potential of their research results. There is also a call for the proof of concept next year, with the typical 3 deadlines. As I mentioned, this is the current information we have on the timeline. Please do check with the ERC directly or with us if there is any changes in the future. And with that, I move to the second program in Pillar 1, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. This program is all about supporting the mobility, training, and career development of researchers. Mobility is required for most of the schemes, and mobility means that you as a researcher can have stayed at most 12 months in the country of the host institution during the past 3 years. Again, as with the ERC, for most schemes, the host organization must be located in a EU member state or country associated to Horizon Europe. There are 5 actions, and I will briefly introduce the 4 of them that are relevant for researchers. Starting with the postdoctoral fellowships. Those were the previously called individual fellowships. As the name says, this is all about career development and training of researchers who hold a PhD. Most likely, a restriction will be implemented that only researchers with less than 6 years, after their PhD can apply. And because this scheme is very popular, the Commission is also thinking about introducing restrictions on resubmission. So depending on the mark that you will get, you will maybe need to wait for a year to reapply. The plan is to open the postdoctoral fellowship call in 2021 in spring and close it in autumn. But again, this is really tentative and might change again. The second action are the doctoral networks. Those were called initial training networks in previous framework programs. This is for several organizations in Europe to join forces and offer doctoral trainings, each for 10 to 15 candidates. This was a very popular scheme in the past, and so very likely there will also be restrictions on resubmissions. As with the fellowship, the Commission is planning to open this scheme in spring and close it towards the end of the year in autumn. Then we have co-fund. This is support for organizations who already have in place or who newly launch either doctoral or postdoctoral fellowship programs. So this is typically for one single organization to apply. Lastly, there is the staff exchange program. This formerly run under the name of RISE, and this is all about skills exchange. Skills not only of researchers themselves, but also of research management personnel, of technical staff, and so on. So it's all about international, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary secondment. These last two schemes, the co-fund and the staff exchange, will probably only be launched. The first calls of these will probably only be launched in autumn, with deadlines then in early 2022. But again, unconfirmed information. And I move to the third program in the excellent science pillar, that of the research infrastructures. There are three main areas I would like to introduce. The first one is on a well-functioning European research infrastructure landscape. And with this area, it's all about consolidating the landscape of research infrastructures on Europe. In this part, you will find support to new infrastructure projects that are on the roadmap of the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures, but also other calls, for example, for already existing research infrastructures in a certain area to be expanded, to integrate new infrastructures, for example, on digitalization or on artificial intelligence or so on. The second area I'd like to introduce is that one on research infrastructure services to support selected communities. And in the first call, this will probably focus on the health, the green, and the digital communities. So in this part of the work program, it's mainly about supporting different research infrastructure in a certain area in Europe to network and to together launch calls for researchers, industry, and so on to access their research infrastructures and make use of their infrastructures. There is also another greatly interesting area on next generation of scientific instruments and tools, where, as the name says, it's about support in developing and fine-tuning tools, instruments, and so on that can be used by a wide range of researchers and innovators. With that, I'm already at the end of introducing the programs within Pillar 1, and I'm gladly passing on the word to Sasha.
Good morning, everyone. So I have the pleasure to present you the Pillar 2. After this very nice introduction from Judith Spinden, you have already heard what the main goal of Pillar 2 is. The Pillar 2 has the goal to tackle global challenges and to strengthen the industrial competition in Europe. So that means that this Pillar 2 funds research and innovation actions that tackle challenges that we all face. For example, harmful emission, safe food, or diseases that we or loved ones from us have to fight against. So these collaborative research projects are different to in Pillar 2, in Pillar 1. They are preset topics, meaning that these research fields are predefined, and you submit together with your international consortium with a minimum of 3 partners from 3 different countries, a proposal only if it fits to the challenges that are predefined in these clusters. Beside these clusters, which we will look at in detail, there is the Joint Research Center, and the Joint Research Center is 7 institutes in 5 European countries that support the European Commission as well as national governments in policy monitoring and policy creation. But now let's have a look at the 6 clusters. Here are the 6 thematic clusters that cover as many research fields as possible and will launch calls every year for the next 7 years with predefined topics to which proposals can be submitted. The goal of the next 10 minutes is to give you insight of what research fields, specific research, for example, in health, or in food, agriculture, and bioeconomy will be funded next year in the first calls that will be launched probably in the springtime with a deadline. At the moment, it looks as if the deadlines for the first calls will be autumn, September, around September. We will have to see because there are delays, as Judith mentioned. But the topics are set and the calls are nearly ready to be launched. That's why we offer you this presentation now that you can see where funding is available in your field and that you can start networking because you need an international consortium with different partners. And these partners can be academics, can be research from research organizations, can be from industry, can be small medium enterprises, can be NGOs. Any legal entity can participate. The consortia are very mixed from the partners because they cover many different expertise. So, but how does the program work? Before I present you the different research fields that will be funded and the calls that will be launched, the content, I would like to just explain the basic rule of this Pillar 2. So, as already mentioned, Pillar 2 has the focus on tackling challenges that we face every day. And for that, the European Commission, together with scientists from all over Europe, and some of you, I've looked at the list of the people being at this webinar, have been consulted to help the Commission shape these work programs to really pinpoint where are the bottlenecks, where do we need funding next year to come a step closer to solutions in urgent problems. So, for example, one problem is the obesity in teenagers in Europe is increasing rapidly. This needs to be changed. This needs to be prevented. And there will be a topic in the health cluster where exactly this problem is spelled out. And in this open call, there will be a description what the expected outcome has to be. The outcome will have to be to understand why we have an increase in obesity, to understand how the youth people, the teenagers, can be reached and what preventative strategies and methods could help them and what therapies could help them also throughout the entire life course. So in this open call, there will be not only the expected outcome described, it will also be a description on the scope and what research has to cover in a successful proposal. And only if your research field fits into this so-called problem or into this topic, then you form a consortium with international partners and you provide a proposal that provides a solution to the predefined topic or the predefined problem. That's how the whole Pillar 2 works. Topics are predefined, collaborative research is funded with consortia that tackle these problems. One more point here to a difference to Pillar 1 that Judith said. Judith said the evaluation criteria in Pillar 1 under ERC, for example, under ERC is excellence only. Here, the evaluation criteria are excellent science or excellent technology development, but equally important is the impact that your research project will have for the society, for the environment, for the economy in Europe. So it's the non-scientific impact that you have to convince that you provide with your project. And then how you organize yourself among a consortium. Also, one point to mention here is the funding for Pillar 2 for these top-down work programs is guaranteed for all of you because Switzerland has the plan B of funding your participation in these projects nationally if there should be any problems regarding the association, which we are fully convinced that there won't be. So in Pillar 2, you can participate and you will receive funding in your collaboration with partners. So the next 7 slides will be on all the different fields in the different clusters where the calls will be launched in spring and that you can get ready now in networking. So that I will talk about many areas that are not relevant for you because we will cover governance, we will cover energy, we will cover health. I'm fully aware that this is a huge array of funding opportunities because half of the entire budget of Horizon Europe will be allocated to this pillar too. So what your job is in the next 7 minutes to grab the keywords relevant for your research fields, which will only be in on one slide or maximum two slides of the next 5 minutes. Grab these keywords and get back to us saying that you're interested in this cluster, in this area, and then we can provide you with much more information on the call details on what will be expected from you in order to be successful. So let's go to cluster one. In the cluster one, in the health cluster, there is going to be 6 destinations, 6 fields where topics will be launched every single year for the next 7 years, starting this spring. The first area is staying healthy in a rapidly changing society. That's where the obesity topic is in that I used as an example. So any disease development throughout the life course is being funded in this area if the topic is in it. The next area funds research on the effect of our living environment and working in our environment on our health and our well-being. Then the third area is tackling diseases and reducing disease burden. There you will not find the definition of what type of diseases are funded. It's more the focus on preventing certain diseases or reducing the suffering in certain diseases, developing better therapies or better diagnostics. We will look at, you will see these, we can provide more information to you. Ensuring access to innovative and sustainable and high quality healthcare has the focus to make our health care systems in Europe more resilient to future crises, more dynamic, and that they can change and adapt to current situations faster. The next area is this cartoon shows it all. I think it's the data, the big, vast amount of data that is available, and to use this data to improve therapies on the individual patients. So with the use of artificial intelligence, with the use of digital solutions, showing in the clinic how this has an added value for the individual patient groups or the individual patient. The last health field then has the focus on supporting innovative and sustainable and globally competitive health industry. What that means is funding new technologies, new services to bring them on the market and to in that way also to fund and support small medium enterprises and industries in the health sector. But this does not mean that small medium enterprises and larger industries are not welcome or actually needed in the other areas. These are an important part of any consortium. Now we go to the second cluster. The second cluster on inclusive society funds research in 3 areas: enhancing democratic governance, promoting cultural heritage on European level or national levels, and managing social and economic transformations. Also, for example, with a focus to the current crisis. Under the third cluster, on the civil security, we have a big funding post on the disaster resilience. Then under the protection of the citizens from crime, on the security from terrorism, security on borders, and the security of important infrastructures in Europe. And last but not least, under the third cluster, it's the cybersecurity, the trust to cybersecurity and the use and benefit for all of us on with cybersecurity. Then one of the largest cluster is the digital industry and space, which is emerging from different programs that we have at present. There, one area is the climate neutral, circular, and digitized production, where a big focus is on the circular economy. The next area is a digitized, resource efficient, and resilient industry, where recycling and less waste production is a big focus next year. And another area is the world leading data and computing technologies, the computing powers needed to use this big data and to work and to have a benefit from this big data. Internet of Things is also an area in here, or the European data space, the cloud and edge computing. More areas on the digital industry and space, one with a big focus on the Green Deal, which is an overreaching focus in the entire Horizon Europe. It's the digital emerging technologies for the Green Deal. One field is, for example, photonics. The next field then is any research on space, space infrastructures, space services, space applications, and space data. For the ones of you active in this field, just be aware that Galileo and Copernicus, Galileo is the satellite navigation and Copernicus is the Earth observation, also has funding provided in this digital industry and space cluster under the area space infrastructures. The last area in this cluster, human-centered and ethical development of digital and industry, has the focus on the trust of artificial intelligence and on the trust on new technologies. The fifth and second last cluster, climate, energy, and mobility. There is a lot of funding on climate science, responses to climate change. Then there is going to be funded on cross-sectoral solutions for the climate transition, where innovative technologies for communities and cities will be developed, and on the sustainable, secure, and competitive energy supply. One important focus will be the renewable energy and the carbon capture. This picture says it all. It's about efficient, sustainable, and inclusive energy. Is the sustainability of energy in buildings and also in industrial facilities. Also, this picture says it all. It's to improve the mobility, to improve the cleanness and the competitive solutions for all transport modes, with the very ambitious goal of reaching zero emissions. And this one, safe, resilient transport and smart mobility services for passengers and goods, with the extremely ambitious goal to target automated mobility solutions. And the last cluster, also relevant to all of us, the entire society in Europe, is the food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, and the environment. Funding there will be allocated to biodiversity and ecosystem services, to safe, healthy food and the food production, and to the circular economy, again, as we had previously, but here in the content of agriculture and bioeconomy and food production. And the health of our land, the health of our oceans and water. Then we also have funding for the clean environment and zero pollution activities, and for the resilient, inclusive, healthy and green rural, coastal and urban communities. And last but not least, the funding for digital solutions on innovative governance and environmental observations. So why did I present this huge array of funding opportunities to you? The idea is that you keep the name of one of these destinations and get back to us saying, we wish more information, or I wish more information in the cluster 6 on this field. And then we can provide you on the topic details, the information that is already available on the call that will be launched in spring. Of course, these work programs are not fully finished yet. They are still drafts. They are still subject to change, but most of the content is ready that you can start planning, because all over Europe, consortia are being set up now. People are networking and seeing with whom they could collaborate in order to prepare a successful proposal. So these 6 areas, clusters with top-down topics are will be launched in spring, and we are here to provide you with the information you need to set up consortia. But of this full budget in Pillar 2, this has been one big focus, but there is 2 other parts. And please keep your attention for the next 2 minutes or 3 minutes, because this is novel. Novel to Horizon Europe are the R&I missions. What are they? The missions are are the 5 big topics across any field of research, any fields of research that we need to tackle in the next 10 years. It's a problem-solving approach with the goal to achieve these ambitious goals by 2030. And they were chosen on the criteria how relevant they are for the European population. So let's have a look at the 5 missions. There is the mission on the top here, adaptation to climate change, including societal transformation. Then there is the mission that by 2030, our oceans, our seas, our coastal and inland waters should be healthier and should be protected, should be better protected and become healthier. Another ambitious goal is to create climate neutral and smart cities by 2030 to improve the health of our soil and therefore improve food production, or the safety and the healthiness of food production. And then there is the cancer mission with the goal of having 3 million lives saved by 2030, people that do not die on cancer anymore, with the goal of improving diagnostics and prevention in cancer. These R&I missions are being developed. They have been developed over the last 2 years, and you will want to know now how are they going to be launched, where is going to be money available. A lot has not been fully decided yet. Some of the missions will start next year, some of them will start a little bit later. Some of the missions will have topics in the work programs in these calls that I presented to you before, and there is also a work program on the missions themselves. They will launch a call as well next year, where these mission areas will launch fundings that you reach these goals. More on the missions is being developed at the moment. The experts nominated for each mission boards are still working, discussing how to implement that these recommendations will be reached by 2030. Stay tuned with our e-alerts, and we inform you more on the missions and how they will be implemented when this information is available. The third type of funding on the Pillar 2 is the European partnerships. What are they? You see these logos here on your left, and some of you are familiar with these logos. These are the current programs that are running on the so-called partnerships. It's the Innovative Medicine Initiative that funds research between the pharma industry and researchers from hospitals, from academia, from small, medium enterprises, from research organizations. And they all have the goal of produce safer and quicker drugs for us all. Then there is also a program called AAL, Ambient Assisted Living, that funds IT technologies to keep the elderly at home longer. Then there is the Copernicus program, which is space research, as I mentioned before. And then there's the Eurostars and Eureka programs that fund the development of technologies or innovations of small, medium enterprises in collaborations with industry to bring these innovations to the market. These are a few of the current partnerships. At present, there is over 100 these type of programs or partnerships, and the goal is to cluster them, that we will only have about 48 partnerships left in Horizon Europe. So EMI continues under another name. AL is going to be merged in another program. Eurostars will continue. Copernicus will continue, but they all will be kind of merged or put together or brought into another program so that the landscape becomes leaner. But what you can expect is different partnerships in the health field, in the digital technology field, in metrology, in air traffic and rail and aviation, in the sustainable bio-based solutions, in the area of hydrogen sustainable energy storage, in clean connected mobility, and, for example, Eurostars in innovative SMEs. Not all of these partnerships are ready to be started next year. Some of them will start in 2022, some of them will start next year. The information is not there for all of them how they will be implemented, but for many of them, as they will be starting or will be implemented under Pillar 2, funding is secured for you working from Switzerland. You will find all this information on the funding and tender portal once these partnerships are fully set up or via our information channels. And always contact us and we give you the information that is available already now. But also here, for example, for EMI and for other programs, funding is already preserved on national level and you can participate should there be delays in the association. Regarding this association or regarding our role in Horizon Europe as Switzerland, you find all the questions, as Judith already mentioned, questions and answers that we received from scientists are on this FAQ on this very website, and you find all the relevant other information regarding the timeline, regarding the current status from Switzerland for Horizon Europe on this website. And this brings my presentation to an end. But my key message for you to really remember, please get back to us now for more information in the specific field that is relevant to you. Now, do not wait for until spring, until the calls are launched, because what we are doing here is happening all over Europe and people are networking, people are discussing possible collaborations to start a consortium and to start preparing. So please get back to us now. We provide you the information we have and we can give you, and then you can start networking via Zoom, via all your channels with your colleagues in Europe. The best of luck to you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Then I will go on with pillar 3. Let me share my presentation. Okay, you should see it now. Let me rearrange slightly here. Okay, very good. So pillar 3 before, so hello from my side. I'm Francesco Kinsley. I'm a national contact point for digital and future emerging technology. And I will introduce you to briefly to pillar 3 in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Before we start with pillar 3, maybe I will step back in time and come back 14 years ago. 14 years ago, the European Commission created an instrument which was the European Research Council. And the goal of that instrument was to push or boost excellent research in Europe. And you have heard from Judith, and I think we all can all agree here that it was one of the big success story of the framework program over the last in the last decade. Now, a couple of months before starting the new program Horizon Europe, actually the Europe intends to do a similar scenario, but not for research this time, but for innovation. And this is why this pillar 3 is about, is really to boost innovation in Europe in the next framework program in this pillar 3. So, but actually, why would Europe care about innovation at all in Europe? And I think one way to see that and one rationale behind that is this plot. So this is the capitalization of digital companies over the world. And you see nicely here on this plot that you have on the left side, the US with the big digital companies. And on the other side, you have Asia, which is also performing quite well when it comes to innovation in the digital sector. And in between, we have Europe, which is lagging behind. And this is the problem a bit that we have in Europe. So we are very good at producing excellent research, but when it comes to transfer this research into innovation, we are not that good. So again, pillar 3 is exactly about that. Pillar 3 is to fix the innovation deficit that we have in Europe, and this is the mindset in that pillar. So how they intend to do this? They intend to do this with three structures. The first is this new European Innovation Council. The second one is having a set of measures to push and promote the European innovation ecosystem. And finally, it's by integrating a structure which existed already in the past, which is the so-called European Institute of Innovation and Technology. So in the next slide, I go through each of them. First, this European Innovation Council. So this so-called EIC, again, is supposed to be the pendant of the European Research Council. So to do for innovation in Europe what the European Research Council did for research over the past decade. This is very much for innovator, either startups and SMEs, or innovation very close to the market, but also for innovation which are very early at the laboratory stage, just after the research results have been produced, and to transfer these research results into technologies. What is there concretely for you as innovator? There are three funding schemes that you will find in this European Innovation Council. The first one is the so-called Pathfinder. So the Pathfinder is for technological development at the lab stage. So I mean, you have research results coming out quite recent, and you can envision out of these research results some technological development that might end up to be quite disruptive in 10 to 20 years from now when they hit the market. So this is what the Pathfinder is about. Technology, but at a very early stage in the development. On the other hand, you have on the other extreme, you have the accelerator. So the EIC accelerator is here for startup and companies. So which means they have a product or a service which is almost ready to go for the market, but it's still too risky for these SMEs and the startups to find investors. So they have possibly disruptive innovation, but investors find it too risky to invest yet. And this is where the European Innovation Council helps with the accelerator. They give you grants to de-risk your go-to-market, let's say, strategy, and that with the hope that that will attract further investors. Now, between the market-ready, let's say, innovation and the very early stage lab bench innovation, there is a big gap you have to fill. As most of you know, it's not because you have a prototype in the lab that you have a product yet. It takes a long time to move it to the product. And this is where also the European Commission comes, and in particular the EIC comes with a new tool, which is this transition activity. So the transition activity is exactly here to move from the prototype in the bench, in the lab bench, to something, a product or a services that would be ready to go for the market. These three tools, these three funding schemes are actually already, you have seen them probably under Horizon 2020 for those of you which have been familiar with the past framework program. The Pathfinder was named the Future and Emerging Technology under Horizon 2020. So Pathfinder is basically taking up what has been developed over the 7 years of Horizon 2020 and reshuffling it in the Pathfinder Open, in the Pathfinder Challenges. So this is what was known, was known in the past as FED Open and FED Proactive. The accelerator is also something you know from the past. It was named under Horizon 2020 the SME Instrument Phase 2, and it was also known as the EIC Pilot Accelerator. So this is for the first scheme, the first element that you will find in this Pillar 3. Maybe one last word here. You can also plot these three instruments in a space where you put here on the horizontal axis, sorry, the technology, so-called technology readiness level, which is a measure of the maturity of the technology, where you have on the left side on the basic research at the scale 1, while on the right side at scale 9 you have the full commercial application. On the vertical axis here, I've plotted the size of the consortium you would need to in your proposal to ask for this kind of funding. And then the Pathfinder would cover here in this space then the technology readiness level 1 to 3. So just after the research level, where you have research concepts which are ready to be transferred into technologies. The accelerator will cover the high end of this scale, so where you are from TRL 6 to TRL 9, so almost then ready to go for the market. And in between, then you have the transition activities, which is helping to bridge from the prototype to market-ready innovation up to TRL 6. And you'll see this also in terms of size of the consortium in this plot, that you have the Pathfinder could be from mono-beneficiary to large consortia, depending on the details of the setup, while the transition is also from mono-beneficiary to small consortia, while the accelerator it's for individual startups or SMEs, and you don't need a consortium there to ask for the grant. Good. So that was the EIC, the European Innovation Council. Let's look at the other two elements. The next element is what the European Commission, what is so-called the European Innovation Ecosystem. Actually, for innovation to happen, of course, you need brilliant researchers, which comes with new concept and excellent engineers, which are able to transfer the concept into technologies and the technologies into products. But that's not enough. Actually, you need ideally other kind of players, other kind of skills in this ecosystem of innovation. So typically you would need people knowing about the business, where your innovation is going to have a big impact when it comes to the market. You would need, of course, investors, which are ready, early investors, which are ready to jump into your innovation. You would need a public authority. You would need patent attorneys and so forth and so on. All these people are what the Commission considers this innovation ecosystem. And here the Commission intends to help very much this ecosystem to grow through Europe. By the way, in Switzerland, we know quite well these ecosystems. We have in the all areas of, so all geographical areas of Switzerland have this kind of innovation parks close to different universities or University of Applied Sciences. Or we also know, for example, the Swiss innovation parks in Switzerland. Now, here, Europe, again, is not going to do what is well done so far at the local level, but Europe has to face one challenge here, and this is the following challenge. So this graph shows the vertical scale is a measure of the innovation in the different European member states. And as you can see, there is quite some spread in terms of innovation capacity and innovation ability through Europe. And this is what one of the issue that the European Commission intends to tackle here. It's about making all regions of Europe and all innovators through Europe able to develop their innovation and push their innovation to the market. Maybe one word here before I go on. These European innovation ecosystem activities are not primarily targeting researchers or innovators or SMEs or startups per se, but more people actually active in this innovation ecosystem through Europe and also through Switzerland. Good. So what will be in this European innovation ecosystem? So basically the European Commission has two goals here. On one side is to tackle these big gaps that we have among the different regions. And the second thing is to make local geographical innovation ecosystem, which work very well at the local level, to be able to be to facilitate their interoperability at a European level. Now, with these two goals in mind, so there are two type of activities for the innovation for a local ecosystem that you have shown you here in the middle of the image. On one side is to improve their connectivity through Europe, and on the other side is to help them to grow and scale up. On the connectivity side, you will find activities like thematic oriented. So your innovation ecosystem locally in your region, in your canton, or might be specifically and specialized in some specific technologies. And these thematics actually might pop up in other innovation ecosystem through Europe. So you might want to, the European Commission will encourage you to have joint activities with them. So you will find activities like joint co-funding activities and joint co-programming activities through Europe. The last element on that side is also the usage of procurements, public procurement, possibly to have these innovation entering the market. So that which is well known that public procurement and procurements in general helps very much early innovation to get the first clients and to get the first deployment activities. On the scale-up side, there is the different activities. On one side is, of course, investment. So scale up of the investment in these different regional ecosystem. Having possibly joint accelerator program with the other innovators across Europe. And finally, what I designed, so I named here deep tech, so to leverage the very good research activities that you have in the different regions of Europe and to facilitate the transition from the deep tech and research activities to the innovation stage. This is for the second activity in Pillar 3, the ecosystem. Now let's move on to the third part, and this is the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. This is actually something which already existed in the past and which has been assigned to Pillar 3 because the role of this EIT is very similar actually to the other activities in Pillar 3. So this European Institute of Innovation and Ecosystem are actually thematics, so they are a group of people, networks of researchers, institutes, and innovators through Europe, group according to some thematics. And they build up so-called knowledge and innovation communities. They have basically 3 activities in there. One is research and innovation mostly. Second is to educate the young generation and the future actors in these thematic kicks. And finally, last but not least, of course, is the entrepreneurship in these domains. So far, we have 8 such kicks. So we have one for climate, one for digital, one for food, for health, energy, raw materials, manufacturing, and mobility. And these EIT, there will be further such kicks in Horizon Europe. So far, the next one has been announced. There will be one community, so there will be the call for one community in cultural and creative industries. So that will be the EIT culture and creativity. So that was the last element of the Pillar 3. So either you are an entrepreneur or a startup or researchers with a brilliant new disruptive technology in mind, then you should look at the EIC part, or you're interested in building up a cross-European community, then the EIT KICS is something you might consider. or you're managing a local ecosystem in your area, and then I encourage you to have a look what is happening in this European innovation ecosystem. With that, I'm done with pillar 3. And if you are interested in anything of what you heard so far, then don't hesitate to either post yet question in the chat. We will try to answer them after my presentation, or just contact us. Just a few words about Euresearch before we move to the question and answer. Maybe also here one word about the state of Switzerland concerning Pillar 3. It's actually very similar to what you have heard about from my colleague Judith and Sasha. So again, the goal of the Swiss government is this full association of Switzerland to Horizon Europe. As Judith already said, the formal negotiations have not started yet, but we are quite optimistic there. It's very likely that the association will be retroactive, but nonetheless, we encourage you to already start working on your proposal, because as Sasha already pointed out, your colleagues through Europe are already warming up. So don't wait too long and start talking to us and thinking about the areas of Horizon Europe which are of interest for you. So Euresearch, what do you get from us? So we are funded by the Swiss government, and all our services are free of charge, and we do three activities. The first one is what we are doing today. So we inform you on the state of Horizon Europe, what's in there, how you can use it for your to progress your research or to progress your innovation. The second element is we advise. So you come to us, we talk together, we sit together. Nowadays with online tools, it's quite easy. We make a short meeting and we discuss where we think you should look in the Horizon Europe or where things might pop up for you. And finally, we connect. So nowadays, we don't do it physically for probably another 6 months or so in the future, but still, since you need to build up a consortium for most of the proposal, we try to help you find or fulfill your consortium or find a consortium there. So again, don't hesitate to contact us. We are a network covering the whole Switzerland. So you are certainly in your region, Euresearch office in your region that will help you. Go on our website, you will find all the contacts. If you are really lost and you don't know who you need to contact, just drop an email to info@euresearch.ch. I also encourage you to have a look at the events that we are doing at the moment. We have quite a number of events going on. So have a look on our webpage on the website of Euresearch. One word on one important event that we are preparing now for February. On the 17th and 18th of February, we will have a Horizon Europe for Switzerland national event. So I encourage you to save the date 17th and the 18th, in particular the 18th, where you will have the possibility to book all of the advisors that we have at Euresearch, either from your region or from the thematic specialists, and we will have you will have a 20-minute slot to talk to us. So with that, I'm done, and I think we can move on to the question and answer session for the next 25 minutes or so. I think, Hannah, you will be distributing the questions to us. So I leave you the floor. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the great presentations. And I would like to start by noting on the question that we have received a few times in the chat is that you will all receive the slides and a notification when the recording is available. And then we move to questions on Pillar 1. this question goes. We have plenty of colleagues with the Doctor Med not accepted as a PhD equivalent by the EU and the habilitation. Are they eligible for ERC grants, and how is their academic age determined?
Yes, I'm happy to take that one. Indeed, the ERC does not recognize an MD degree as equivalent to a PhD, but they do consider an MD degree together with an employment that typically would require PhD equivalency. I'm sorry for the complicated wording, but it's the one used by the ERC as equivalent for a PhD. So basically you need to prove that additional to your MD degree, you also had a position that typically would require a PhD, such a postdoc position. Of course, if you have had a habilitation, that will be proof enough, although the habilitation itself will not be recognized as a formal point of view to calculate eligibility. In those cases, for those who hold the MD but not a PhD, the date of your MD degree will count, and you will additionally extend the window by 2 years. So basically, to be eligible for a starting grant, you would need to be between 4 to 9 years after your MD. To be eligible for a consolidator grant, it will be 9 to 14 years after your MD. Again, within those time windows, you can apply under certain circumstances extensions. For example, for clinical training, you can then again extend this eligibility time windows. I admit it can be quite complicated to assess whether you're eligible for a starting or a consolidated grant, and for which one for MDs. So we're very happy if you address your specific situation to us on us ERC NCPs, or you can also just address the general research address.
Okay, and then we have some questions on MSCA. Will MSCA deadlines be the same as in Horizon 2020? And is it new that postdoc MSCA postulation is limited to 6 years after PhD?
Well, to the first question on the timeline of the deadlines, the short answer is no. It's the same reason that I mentioned for ERC. Typically, also the MSCA calls were called on a yearly basis, and that at least for some of the schemes, the calls open in the year before the work program under which they were running. And this launch of a call before the work program under which budget it runs is not possible at the transition between 2 framework programs, because you can only launch a call once the program is formally established, and that's not the case before, will start before the 1st of January at least. So there is some disruptions, not for all Marie Skłodowska-Curie schemes. The disruptions are of the same amount. Basically, the Commission was keen for the 2 most popular actions, the fellowships and the training networks, to keep them as much as possible to the yearly schedule. So actually, if they can stick to what they plan for the fellowships, there is very little of a disruption, because they are expected to close in autumn. For the training networks, there is quite a disruptions, because usually they are opening the year before the call year. That's not possible, but that's also why the Commission wants to open the training network call in spring with a deadline then in autumn. But that would be quite a disruption. And then for co-fund, there will be about a half-year disruption, and for RISE there is quite a tremendous disruption, because it's also a scheme that normally opens the year before. But this is basically, this disruption will be in place for 2021, probably some of 2022. But I guess as with the ERC, the aim is then to, after 1.5 or so years into the new framework program, that we're back on the normal yearly scale cycle. And then the second question was on the expected limitation to apply for the postdoctoral fellowships. This was not in place so far. This is something that we heard would come, but it's something that is, to my knowledge, also not officially confirmed, that there will be a limit, and you could only apply if you had less than 6 years after your PhD. I would expect also that within those 6 years, there are reasons why you can that let you expand this time duration between PhD and the reference date of 6 years. But I would need to refer you to our specialist for the Marie Skłodowska correction for more concrete details.
And one final quick question on MSCA. Can SMEs be a part of training networks within the MSCA?
Oh yes, I would say any legal entity in Europe can be a partner, and in general in the MSCA program it is very welcome that also young researchers get exposed not only to different academic settings but also to industrial settings. So yes, in general, very welcome and possible.
All right, moving on to pillar 2. Ready, Sasha?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's go with the first one. Does pillar 2 only support research or also industrial developments like SMEs, corporate startups?
It also funds industrial developments. It's the research and innovation where that is targeted, and it also has an aim of supporting companies in bringing technologies to the market. So the funding of industrial development is encouraged, and depending on the topic description, it's needed or compulsory, and small, medium enterprises need money. Yeah.
Okay. Then, if all goes well today and tomorrow on the summit, when we could expect the first deadlines in pillars 2 and 3?
I'm not talking for pillar 3. I'm leaving that to Francesco. For pillar 2, I can only say that first of all, the deadlines were the calls in the clusters were meant to be published in March with deadlines in June. That was in the first draft of the work program, and then there was the veto from Hungary and Poland on the budget. And since then, the deadlines are postponed to September. That the call deadlines might most likely be September. But maybe Francesco has even newer information than that the calls will be launched in the springtime.
All right.
Maybe I just answer right away. No, I don't have newer information on that. It's going to be very similar. It remains very unclear. We have to wait there.
Okay. What do we know today of the budget share for pillar 2 and the budget repartition inside pillar 2?
Okay, 1 point to the last, and then I answer the budget share on the pillar 2. The work programs, the important part for you for planning now is that these work program drafts have been discussed over 3 or 4 circles and are going through the inter-service consultation. That's an EU jargon. That means afterwards they are more or less ready and they just wait to be launched. So what is relevant for you is that you know the content of these calls, and then if the deadline is a bit later and the call launch is a bit later, you just have a few more months to start planning, which is in a way not that bad because the content is set. And that brings me to the budget allocation in the different clusters, because the entire budget is still being negotiated, how it's going to be split in the pillars and in the clusters. We don't have the final figures, but what I can tell you is that the figures, the proportion is very similar to the current program on the thematics, except that the cluster 6, the agriculture and bioeconomy, will increase in budget. But apart from that, the cluster sizes, the budget will be very similar to what we have so far. Does Francesco want to add something to this?
No, it's perfect.
All right, next question. There is an attendee interested in cluster 4 of pillar 2 on topics concerning big data and artificial intelligence. The question is, do we know something more about the content of these calls? Otherwise, how can we set up collaborations if we don't know what the calls are about?
So one of the experts for cluster 4 is Francesco, but I'm talking because there is more questions coming in this sense, and just for all of you, what we planned with this overview is to give you the information what you can expect in the clusters. But yes, there is way more information available, but we can't present that in 15 minutes. So contact the NCP for that cluster. For the big data and artificial intelligence, it's Francesco and Riccardo Scarinci. Contact them and say exactly your question now, because I've seen it's the same question for cluster 2 and for different clusters. And we are able to provide you with basically a list of topics, and then you really can start planning. But we can't provide you that in such a webinar. It's too much. Information is here. And follow up to that, I have read one comment, and maybe it's in the same question, Hannah, that the question was, how can we find partners if we don't know exactly the content of these topics? Very good question. And what I can tell you is that we in Switzerland, with our association, with everything, we are extremely careful how we don't share these non-existing official work programs. We just can't. But in other countries, these work programs are on the website of the different universities. They are publicly available for the scientists. So get the information from the NCP in Switzerland and then talk about the topic title, because your colleagues in Europe have this information.
All right. I will have another question, which is in the same vein. For someone from the humanities and Pillar 2, could you please recommend any way to network to get in touch with people or consortia that may be interested in including a perspective from the humanities to their more applied projects?
Thank you very much for this question. Because I didn't mention the need of SSH, Social Sciences and Humanities, really, I didn't put the focus in my presentation. The social sciences and humanities are very much encouraged to participate in all the clusters where it's relevant, where their research can improve the link to the society, the link to the end user, or the understanding, or the any aspect that they can provide added value. So actually these consortia are not only multidisciplinary from the legal entities, small, medium enterprises, academia, NGOs, but also from the scientific fields. So SSH, social sciences, is very much encouraged to participate. And before I go to the partnering part of the question, one more point regarding the missions. In the missions, the focus is very much on the end users. And for example, in cancer, but it's also in the city one, that social scientists are very much addressed to participate and to bring their solutions for the patients or for the cities. So social sciences and humanities and applied research is very much encouraged in all these programs. Now to the partnering. Once all these calls are launched, you find them all on the so-called participant funding and tender portal. You find all the open calls. And when you find all the open calls, you find also all the open topics. And under each topic, there is the facility of putting your profile down as a partner search profile, what expertise you can bring into a consortia and what type of partners you are looking for. So yes, this kind of database does exist, but because the launch of the calls have not happened yet, you have no access to them. But what you can do now, and please all take a pen and write down the Cordis project database, CORDIS, Cordis project database. If you Google that, you get all the projects that have run or are running in the past and now in the specific fields. So you will be extremely surprised and maybe extremely happy putting your keywords into the Cordis project database, and you see that someone you may have common publications with has already funding in an EU project. It's really, if you give yourself an hour to play around on the Cordis project database, you see who of your colleagues that you know from your publications are already in projects, and you can contact these now. And one more tip, have a look at when these projects run out. Any collaborative project that runs out this year or next year, and if the coordinator is happy about the work and the funding they have received, you can be nearly guaranteed that they are already setting up a new consortium. So find out what they do and let them know that you're interested to participate.
Let me draw your attention to the fact that Francesca just shared the link to Cordis on the chat.
Thank you.
All right. The interconnection between R&I and Pillar 2 clusters is not clear to an attendee. The consortium will have to respond to the objectives of the call impact, but also to the R&I missions.
Very good question. Initially, that was the plan, that you should answer also to the goal of the missions, but this is not the case anymore to my knowledge. So you really answer to the topic requirements in the call within the cluster where you are interested to participate. The missions will be a different approach. Part of them will be as topics in the work program, and part of them will be in a mission work program. But when you submit in Pillar 2 to a specific cluster, you have to answer all the impact that's written under this specific topic, to which we can provide you the information. And just to not confuse you, but to let you know, the European Commission has a big focus on the Sustainable Development Goals. And for each of these clusters, we have specific Sustainable Development Goals that also should be addressed. But we are here to support you, and get back to us and we tell you more if you need help.
All right, let's take one more for Pillar 2. Pillar 2 and European partnerships. Is there any information or change regarding the funding rates of SMEs within Eureka and Eurostars?
I'm really sorry, I have to pass on this, because I know that this partnership is being discussed on national levels with the different stakeholders in the different countries, and in Switzerland that will be InnoSwiss, and I do not know the actual status. I don't know whether Francesco knows the actual current status or not.
I think this is under discussion. The best is to contact InnoSwiss. InnoSwiss has a page for Eureka, Eurostars, and to ask them directly what are the perspectives there.
Let's move to Pillar 3. Is Pillar 3 also targeted towards universities, or what role are universities playing in Pillar 3?
Yes, so it's a very good question. So there are basically two target audience in Pillar 3. If you take, for example, the European Innovation Council, so you have heard that the accelerator is clearly targeting startups and SMEs. So this is not for primarily for universities, unless you are, let's say, a startup for a university, but there you have to be for-profit private company. But the EIC Pathfinder is indeed for universities. Again, it's very much on technology. So it's not basic research that you would have in the ERC or the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. This is technology, but there are universities which are around and are visionary and don't do only basic research, but also do technological development. And we do, since the EIC Pathfinder is the successor of the FED Open and FED Proactive, from the past, we see that the main actors in the EIC Pathfinder were research institutions transforming recent research results into technology. Of course, universities, they do play a role in the European innovation ecosystems. So because they are part of the ecosystem, by definition, there too. And in the EIT, so European Institute of Innovation and Technologies, in the various KICs, they also have a role to play there. So basically, Pillar 3, there are plenty of room for universities.
All right, thank you for that. Is there any idea when the transition and accelerator will start? And when is the next EIC accelerator funding round that SMEs can apply for?
This is a very good question. So again, we are a bit in this, we don't have concrete dates so far. So keep asking us the questions and we will keep you informed. As Sasha said, the budget is not officially decided yet, so that will take some time. But keep asking us and then we will inform you with the current status.
Great. And could you please provide a little more information on the transition grants?
Yeah.
You already addressed when these calls will open, but how large are the grants? What is the success rate likely to be?
Okay, so maybe be careful with the transition. So the transition grants will be only for results coming out of a future and emerging technology project. So you cannot apply to a transition for any kind of technologies. You have to have a link to a running or recently finished FED project. So this is one important element here. In terms of grants, so if you take what we are, actually the EIC transition has been pilot at the end of 2019 with a first small pilot call. The size of the grant will be about 2 million, something like that, and you will be able to apply as a mono beneficiary or in a consortium. But if you want more detail, please come back to me and then we can have a detailed discussion.
Thank you, Francesco. We have a few general questions, and I was wondering we can probably take a couple of them. Could you give some more insights about what is the situation of Switzerland for this new Horizon Europe? Under which conditions and for which programs can Swiss partners participate and be funded? And a related question, what is the current and envisioned status on the participation of Horizon Europe Swiss companies, especially in Pillar 3 and EIC schemes? You want to start with that, Judith?
Yeah, maybe I can start. It's already there in the question very nicely, the distinction between eligibility to participate and eligibility to receive EC funding. Now, in all the pillar or in the absolute majority of the Pillar 2 calls, any organization established in any country worldwide can typically participate as long as the minimum conditions of the 3 different ones from EU member states and associated countries are fulfilled, but they're nearly automatically anyways if you're competitive. The question then is only, where does the funding come from? Now in Switzerland, we're in the lucky situation that even if we should not be able to get fully associated, there is national funding that is already within the bill to Parliament reserved, that participants to Pillar 2 projects will be funded nationally in case we're not associated and they don't get automatically the EC funding. The other thing is for the so-called mono-beneficiary schemes. So the schemes where one organization applies. There typically, if a country is not associated, you're not eligible to participate and you cannot just buy this up. And that is really an issue. And for those cases, like the ERC fund, like the EIC accelerator, I guess in most cases, in the parliamentary bill of the Federal Council, there is a hint to possible compensation measures on a national level. But how, how they will be and how much they will really match the EU measures, that is not clear at this moment. I think that is important to have this distinction there. And I think we can just reiterate that is the clear goal of Switzerland to be fully associated to all the pillars. And we have very promising signs from the EU, but there is also the political side, the higher level political side, where some progress on the institutional agreement is being expected from Switzerland. And that's out of the side of the DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission.
Yes, and I see that Francesco just shared an excellent link in the chat, a page on the SERI, on the Ministry's website concerning Swiss association. Then we have a question concerning Brexit. How will be the collaboration with UK partners? For example, a university with a nice POC can be applied together as industry to a Pathfinder project.
Yeah, I take that one. So I think UK is the other gray area at the moment. So that will depend very much on how they get associated to Horizon Europe. So they're very much in a similar situation as Switzerland. So we cannot tell at the moment what's the status. By the way, the Swiss government has a similar page as the Swiss government concerning the association. But if you have a concrete question with a concrete setup in a Pathfinder project, please approach us, and we are in touch with our colleague in the UK, so the advisors from the British national contact points, and we can get the latest news from their side. I assume, seeing what has been happening at the end of Horizon 2020, the government set aside some funding to have some national funding scheme in case something association should not happen. So I assume there is something similar up, but again, come with specific questions and we will do our best to direct you and to find the appropriate answer there.
Right, and there's one more question aimed, I think, to you, Francesco. Will Euresearch inform also about the Digital Europe program?
Yes, very good question. So some of you might know there is Horizon Europe is a program, but there is a sister program which is called the Digital Europe program, which has a slightly different scope, but which is also very interesting. We do inform from time to time, so go on our webpage on the events. You might see one event where we do it. So we informed yesterday, for example, at the event for Ticino on the Digital Europe program, but also approach us here if you have questions on the Digital Europe program. Switzerland also intends to get associated to Digital Europe, and there might be things which might be also of interest for you there.
Right. And final question, and I think you touched upon this already briefly, Sasha, but do you want to still say something? Will you be able to share the drafts of the calls?
I have seen that question from, yeah, I've seen that question. No, we can't. As we explained, this is not possible at this stage. We are not allowed to do this. And these work programs are subject to change. They are still confidential, and they, for example, have no budget or no deadlines in it. Some of you may know that other member states, European member states, have less problems sharing these. It was open, publicly available on a Swedish university website for a few weeks, and then the Swedish university website had to take it down again, and now it's protected. So really the rule is, or the game is, nowhere it should be publicly available. That's what the European Commission wants. So, for example, the University of Leuven has it on their website for all their scientists. If you can get your fingers or your hands on it from your colleagues in Europe, then by all means do. And otherwise, what we can do is give you the information on the topics.
All right. Thank you, all the participants, for excellent and pertinent questions. We are running a couple of minutes late, but I think nobody minds because we had such good questions. And thanks for the answers. I give it to you, Francesco.
Yeah, so I will close the event here. So thank you very much to all the participants for coming and posting so many interesting questions. Again, so I hope we were able today to wake your interest with my colleague Judith and Sasha, and with the help of Hannah, to wake your interest to Horizon Europe. Again, we are a network. All our services are free of charges, so really don't hesitate to contact us. Come to us with your questions by email or give us a call or us, the advisors, but also the people in the network. And we are here really to help you and speed up your access to this beautiful 80 billion plus Horizon Europe program. I hope by now you realize that actually the clock of Horizon Europe started ticking. So it's time to roll up your sleeves, activate your network, ask the questions. Don't wait until the last moment. As Sasha said, we see that your colleagues in Europe are already very active. And we wish you all the best for this first step in this new Horizon program, and we hope to see you soon physically again in Switzerland or somewhere else. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you, and please answer to our evaluation survey, which will pop up in the link when this event ends. Thank you very much.